Let us know where you're watching from today, as we share a story that reminds us how a single act of kindness can create ripples of hope that touch countless lives. In the quiet halls of Cedar Grove Children's Hospital, a young boy's wish was about to change not just his life, but the lives of everyone around him. Michael Wilson had been fighting leukemia for 3 years, his small frame growing weaker but his spirit remaining unbroken. At just 14 years old, he had spent more time in hospital rooms than on basketball courts, where he once dreamed of playing. The walls of his room were covered with Lakers posters, and his most prized possession was a worn basketball that he kept by his bed, even though he could no longer play. It was nurse Jennifer Martinez who first noticed how Michael's eyes would light up during Lakers games, especially when Kobe Bryant was playing. Even on his worst days, when the pain was almost unbearable, he would muster the strength to watch every game, studying each move, each shot, as if memorizing a sacred text. The night everything changed started like any other. Dr. Robert Anderson had just finished his evening rounds, delivering news that Michael's condition had worsened. The treatments weren't working as hoped, and the unspoken weight of time hung heavy in the room. Michael's parents, James and Angela Wilson, tried to maintain brave faces, but their eyes betrayed the fear that every parent in their situation knows all too well. That evening, while his parents had stepped out to speak with the doctors, Michael confided in Jennifer. "You know what's funny?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the soft beeping of medical monitors. "I used to pray to be just like Kobe. Now I just pray to meet him, even if just for a minute." Jennifer had heard many last wishes in her 15 years of nursing, but something about Michael's quiet dignity, his unwavering faith in his hero, touched her deeply. Without making any promises, she began making calls that night, reaching out to everyone she knew who might have a connection to the Lakers organization. The response was always the same, polite but distant, explaining how busy Kobe's schedule was, how many similar requests they received. But Jennifer refused to give up. She reached out to local sports reporters, hospital administrators, anyone who might help. Most didn't even return her calls. Days turned into weeks, and Michael's condition continued to decline. The basketball stayed by his bed, but he no longer had the strength to hold it. The Lakers games still played on his room's TV, but his eyes were often too tired to stay open for more than a few minutes at a time. Then one evening, Lisa Parker, a hospital volunteer who had been helping care for Michael, overheard his wish. Her brother, David Parker, worked as a security guard at the Lakers training facility. It wasn't much of a connection, but it was something. She made the call that night. The next day, David mentioned Michael's story to Richard Johnson, one of the team's assistant trainers. Richard, touched by the story, took a chance and brought it up during a training session. Word spread quickly through the facility, eventually reaching Nancy Henderson, Kobe's personal assistant. What happened next would remind everyone involved about the power of human connection. Nancy, who had handled thousands of similar requests over the years, found herself particularly moved by Michael's story. She knew Kobe's schedule was packed. Practices, games, family commitments, and commercial obligations filled every hour. But something about this case felt different. Late that evening, after a particularly grueling practice session, Nancy approached Kobe with Michael's story. She expected the usual polite but firm decline. After all, if he honored every request, he would never have time to sleep. But as she described Michael's situation, she noticed something change in Kobe's expression. Perhaps it was because he had daughters of his own, or maybe it was the way Michael had stayed dedicated to watching every game despite his condition. Whatever the reason, Kobe didn't just agree to visit. He insisted on going that very night. The hospital staff had no warning. Jennifer was just finishing her shift when she saw a commotion near the entrance. Security guards were trying to maintain order as word spread through the building that Kobe Bryant had arrived. But this wasn't the dramatic entrance of a celebrity. Kobe had come alone, wearing simple clothes, carrying nothing but a Lakers jersey and a basketball. When he entered Michael's room, the boy was asleep, exhausted from another round of treatments. His parents, who had been dozing in chairs beside his bed, stood in shocked silence. Kobe quietly asked them to let Michael sleep, pulling up a chair to wait. For nearly an hour, he sat there, watching the steady rise and fall of Michael's chest, occasionally asking his parents questions about their son. He wanted to know everything: Michael's favorite plays, his dreams, how he had stayed strong through his battles. When Michael finally stirred and opened his eyes, he thought he was dreaming. Kobe Bryant, the man whose posters covered his walls, was sitting beside his bed, smiling warmly. "I heard you're my biggest fan," Kobe said softly. What followed was not the rushed visit of a celebrity fulfilling an obligation, but a genuine connection between two souls. Kobe didn't just sign autographs or take pictures, he stayed for hours, talking basketball, sharing stories, and listening to Michael's own dreams and fears. At one point, Nurse Jennifer returned to the room to find them both laughing, Kobe demonstrating shooting techniques using Michael's worn basketball. The NBA star had removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and was fully engaged in teaching Michael the finer points of his famous fadeaway shot, even though the boy could barely sit up in bed. "You know what makes a champion?" Kobe asked Michael, his voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "It's not about the wins or the records. It's about getting up every single day and fighting, no matter what life throws at you. And from what I've heard, you're already a champion." The words hit home not just for Michael, but for everyone in the room. His parents, who had been struggling to stay strong, found themselves wiping away tears. The medical staff, who had seen so much suffering, felt a renewed sense of purpose in their work. Before leaving, Kobe did something unexpected. He took off his championship ring, or one of his most prized possessions, and placed it in Michael's hand. "This ring represents years of hard work, dedication, and never giving up," he said. "I want you to hold on to it for me. It needs to be with a true champion." The gesture left everyone speechless. This wasn't just a celebrity visit or a publicity stunt, it was a moment of pure human connection, a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of kindness come from the most unexpected places. As Kobe prepared to leave, Michael grabbed his hand with what little strength he had left. "Thank you," he whispered, "not just for coming, but for showing me that dreams do come true." The impact of that night extended far beyond Michael's hospital room. The staff, who had grown somewhat jaded from years of seeing suffering, were reminded of the power of compassion. Other patients, hearing about Kobe's visit, found new hope in their own battles. But perhaps the most profound change was in Michael himself. Though his physical condition hadn't improved, something in his spirit had been rekindled. He fought harder in his treatments, inspired by Kobe's words about never giving up. When the pain became unbearable, he would clutch the championship ring, drawing strength from what it represented. So, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and share your thoughts about acts of kindness that changed your life. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone went above and beyond to make a difference? Because sometimes the most powerful moments in life aren't the big, public victories, but the quiet acts of compassion that remind us of our shared humanity. Before we reveal how Kobe's visit would create waves of change throughout the community, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. What started as one act of kindness would soon transform countless lives in ways no one could have predicted. The morning after Kobe's visit, Cedar Grove Children's Hospital felt different. News of the previous night's events spread quickly through the halls, carried by whispers of hope and amazement. Dr. Robert Anderson noticed it first during his morning rounds. There was a new energy in the air, a sense that miracles were possible. Michael Wilson's room had become something of a shrine. The championship ring Kobe had left sat in a small protective case by his bed, catching the morning light and sending tiny reflections dancing across the walls. But more remarkable than the ring was the change in Michael himself. Despite his weakened condition, his eyes held a new fire, a determination that hadn't been there before. Jennifer Martinez, the nurse who had started it all, found herself overwhelmed by the response. Other patients and their families began reaching out, sharing their own stories of hope and struggle. The simple act of trying to fulfill one child's wish had sparked a conversation about the importance of never giving up, no matter the odds. But the story was far from over. William Harris, a local news reporter who had initially ignored Jennifer's calls about Michael's wish, heard about Kobe's visit and came to the hospital to investigate. What he found wasn't just a heartwarming story about a basketball star visiting a sick child. It was a testament to the power of human connection. The article William wrote captured the essence of that night, focusing not on Kobe's celebrity status, but on the genuine connection he had formed with Michael. He described how the NBA star had spent hours teaching basketball techniques to a boy who could barely sit up, how he had shared stories of his own struggles and setbacks, and how he had left behind not just a ring, but a renewed sense of purpose. The story caught fire. Other media outlets picked it up, and soon Michael's room was flooded with letters and messages from people around the country. Each one shared a similar theme, how the story had reminded them of their own battles, their own moments of doubt, and their own reasons to keep fighting. Among those touched by the story was Anthony White, a former college basketball player who had left the sport behind after a career-ending injury. Reading about Michael's determination despite his condition made Anthony realize he had more to give. He reached out to the hospital with an idea, using basketball as therapy for young patients. Dr. Elizabeth Martinez, the hospital's chief of pediatric medicine, was initially skeptical of Anthony's proposal. But seeing the change in Michael and other patients who had been inspired by Kobe's visit, she decided to give it a chance. The hospital's recreation room was converted into a mini basketball court, with adjustable hoops that could be lowered for patients in wheelchairs. Anthony's program, which he named Hoops of Hope, started small. Michael, though still confined to his bed, helped design drills and exercises that could be adapted for patients with different abilities and conditions. His experience with both basketball and illness made him uniquely qualified to bridge the gap between what the kids wanted to do and what they could safely manage. Laura Miller, a physical therapist at the hospital, noticed something remarkable about the program. Patients who had been reluctant to participate in traditional therapy were suddenly eager to try when it involved basketball. The sport became more than just a game. It became a way to measure progress, to set goals, and to celebrate small victories. One such victory came from Rachel Brown, a 12-year-old patient recovering from spinal surgery. She had been told she might never walk again, but inspired by Michael's story and Anthony's guidance, she set a goal to make one basket from her wheelchair. The day she finally succeeded, the entire ward erupted in cheers. Kobe himself remained involved, though not in the way many might have expected. Instead of making grand public appearances, he would send quiet messages of encouragement through Jennifer, who had become the unofficial keeper of what the staff now called the ring story. He wanted the focus to remain on the kids and their fights, not on his celebrity. Michael's parents, James and Angela Wilson, watched in amazement as their son, despite his declining physical condition, found new purpose in helping others. From his hospital bed, he became a mentor and inspiration to other patients, sharing not just basketball techniques, but the wisdom he had gained from his own journey. The impact extended beyond the hospital walls. Local schools began organizing basketball tournaments to raise funds for pediatric cancer research. Community centers started programs modeled after Hoops of Hope. What had started as one boy's wish to meet his hero had evolved into a movement about resilience, hope, and the power of community. Stephen Reynolds, a hospital board member who had initially been concerned about the attention Kobe's visit might bring, found himself moved to tears during a visit to the recreation room. There he saw children who, despite their illnesses, were finding joy and purpose through basketball. "This isn't just about sports," he observed. "It's about giving these kids a reason to fight." The medical staff began noticing unexpected benefits. Dr. Patricia Young, an oncologist, reported that patients involved in the basketball program showed better compliance with their treatments and maintained more positive attitudes. The physical activity, even if minimal, seemed to help with both recovery and pain management. But perhaps the most profound impact was on the families. Michelle Hammond, a social worker at the hospital, started a support group for parents, using Michael's story as a starting point for discussions about hope, resilience, and finding purpose in the midst of struggle. The championship ring became a symbol of their shared journey, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could be found. One evening, about a month after Kobe's visit, Jennifer found Michael teaching basketball strategy to Kevin Davis, a newly admitted patient who was struggling to accept his diagnosis. Using his worn basketball and a small whiteboard, Michael explained plays with the patience and wisdom of someone far beyond his years. "You know what Kobe taught me?" she overheard Michael saying to Kevin. "It's not about how many shots you make or how many games you win. It's about getting up every day and giving it everything you've got, even when it feels impossible. Especially when it feels impossible. The word struck Jennifer deeply. In all her years of nursing, she had seen many patients face incredible challenges, but there was something special about watching a child who was fighting his own battle take the time to lift up others. The hospital administration took notice. Robert Wilson, the hospital's director of patient services, worked with Anthony to expand the Hoops of Hope program to other pediatric hospitals in the region. Each location received a basketball signed by Kobe, but more importantly, they received the blueprint for how sports could be used to build community and inspire hope among young patients. Michael's condition continued to fluctuate, with good days and bad, but his spirit remained unshakable. The championship ring stayed by his bed, not as a piece of memorabilia, but as a tangible reminder of the night someone believed in him enough to share their own symbol of triumph. Local businesses began to get involved. Joseph Martin, owner of a sporting goods store, donated equipment to the hospital's program. Diana Garcia, a graphic designer, created inspiring posters featuring quotes from both Kobe and Michael for the hospital walls. The community was coming together in ways no one had anticipated. Even the hospital's staff found themselves transformed. Nurses who had been on the verge of burnout found renewed purpose in their work. Doctors who had become clinically detached remembered the human side of medicine. The simple act of trying to fulfill one child's wish had reminded everyone why they had chosen healthcare in the first place. So, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and share your thoughts about how one act of kindness can create ripples of change. Have you witnessed a moment of compassion that grew into something bigger than anyone expected? Because sometimes the most powerful transformations don't come from grand gestures or elaborate plans, but from simple acts of human connection that remind us we're all in this together. Before we reveal how Michael's story would touch lives far beyond the hospital walls, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. The impact of one basketball legend's act of kindness was about to create a legacy that would inspire generations to come. 3 months after Kobe's visit, Cedar Grove Children's Hospital had become more than just a medical facility. The Hoops of Hope program had transformed the atmosphere from one of quiet resignation to active hope. Even patients too ill to participate would gather in the recreation room, cheering on their fellow warriors as they attempted shots from wheelchairs or took careful steps with the help of physical therapists. Michael Wilson's condition had stabilized, though he remained critically ill. His room had become a hub of activity, with other patients seeking his advice not just about basketball, but about facing their battles with courage. The championship ring still sat by his bed, but now it was joined by dozens of letters, cards, and small tokens from people whose lives had been touched by his story. Dr. Christina Walker, a child psychologist at the hospital, began documenting the changes she observed in her patients. Those involved in the basketball program showed significant improvements in their emotional well-being, and even those who could only watch seemed to benefit from the sense of community that had developed. One particular case stood out. Lisa Anderson, a 16-year-old patient struggling with depression after a cancer diagnosis, had been refusing treatment and withdrawing from everyone around her. After hearing Michael's story and witnessing the energy in the recreation room, she slowly began to emerge from her shell. She couldn't play basketball, but she started keeping score and creating statistical analyses of the games, finding her own way to be part of the community. The program's success caught the attention of Michelle Patterson, Director of Pediatric Programs at the National Children's Hospital Association. She visited Cedar Grove to observe firsthand what was happening. What she found amazed her, not just the basketball program, but the entire culture of hope and resilience that had grown around it. Jennifer Martinez, who had started it all with her determination to fulfill Michael's wish, found herself invited to speak at medical conferences about the importance of addressing patients' emotional and spiritual needs alongside their physical treatment. Her talks always began with the story of Michael and Kobe, but they went deeper, exploring how moments of genuine human connection could transform the healing process. Anthony White's Hoops of Hope program had expanded to 15 other hospitals across the country. Each location adapted the program to their needs, but the core principle remained the same, using basketball as a way to build community and inspire hope among young patients. Anthony made sure that every new location heard Michael's story, understanding that they were part of something bigger than just physical therapy. Local high schools began organizing basketball tournaments in Michael's honor, with proceeds going to pediatric cancer research. Richard Johnson, who had first passed Michael's story to Kobe's assistant, worked with the Lakers organization to provide signed memorabilia for fundraising events. But more valuable than any autographed item were the stories of hope and perseverance that emerged from these gatherings. Angela Morris, a physical education teacher at a nearby middle school, created a modified basketball curriculum inspired by the hospital program. Her goal was to make sports accessible to students of all abilities, teaching them that victory wasn't just about scoring points, but about supporting each other and never giving up. The impact on the medical staff continued to evolve. Dr. Robert Anderson, who had delivered so many difficult diagnoses over the years, found himself approaching his work differently. He began spending more time listening to his patients' dreams and fears, understanding that treating the spirit was as important as treating the body. One day, a new patient arrived at Cedar Grove. Daniel Howard, a 12-year-old boy recently diagnosed with the same type of leukemia Michael had been fighting, was terrified and angry about his situation. His parents, William and Catherine Howard, were struggling to maintain hope in the face of such devastating news. Michael asked to meet with Daniel. Though weakened by his own ongoing battle, he insisted on being wheeled to Daniel's room. What happened next moved everyone who witnessed it. Michael took off Kobe's championship ring and handed it to Daniel. "This ring has a story," Michael told him. "It's about never giving up, about fighting even when everything seems impossible. Kobe gave it to me when I needed hope, and now I want you to hold on to it for a while. Because you're part of our team now, and champions help each other." The gesture embodied everything the program had come to represent: strength, community, and the power of passing hope forward. Daniel's transformation was remarkable. Within days, he had joined the other patients in the recreation room, his initial fear replaced by determination. Word of Michael's gesture reached Kobe, who responded by sending championship rings to every hospital that had adopted the Hoops of Hope program. Each ring came with a letter explaining its significance, not as a piece of basketball history, but as a symbol of the fight that every young patient faced. The media attention had shifted from the initial heartwarming story of a celebrity visit to something more meaningful. Journalists like Emma Patterson began exploring the deeper impact of the program, documenting how a simple wish had sparked a movement that was changing the way children's hospitals approached patient care. Laura Wilson, a nurse at one of the hospitals that had adopted the program, shared a powerful observation: "We're not just treating illnesses anymore. We're nurturing warriors." Every child who comes through our doors learns that they're part of something bigger than their diagnosis. They're part of a team, and teams never give up on each other. The program's success led to research studies on the impact of community-based support programs in pediatric care. Dr. James Murphy, a leading researcher in pediatric oncology, began a comprehensive study of how initiatives like Hoops of Hope affected treatment outcomes and quality of life for young patients. Michael's parents, James and Angela Wilson, started a foundation to support families dealing with pediatric illnesses. They understood firsthand the emotional and financial toll of long-term hospital stays. The foundation worked to provide not just financial assistance, but also to create support networks for families facing similar challenges. The hospital's annual fundraising gala took on new meaning. Instead of the usual formal dinner, it was transformed into a basketball-themed celebration of hope. Patients who were able participated in modified games, demonstrating the spirit of determination that had become Cedar Grove's hallmark. Even those who had initially been skeptical of the program's value had become believers. Dr. Elizabeth Martinez, who had hesitated to approve Anthony's initial proposal, now championed the program at medical conferences. "We're seeing medicine through a new lens," she would say. "One that recognizes the healing power of hope and community." Michael's condition remained serious, but his legacy was already secure. Every day, children in hospitals across the country found strength through the program he had inspired. His story had become a beacon of hope, proving that even in the darkest moments, one person's courage could light the way for others. The championship ring that Kobe had left that night had multiplied, not just in physical form, but in meaning. Each ring represented a promise to fight, to support others, and to never give up. They were passed from patient to patient, carrying with them stories of courage and determination. So, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and share your thoughts about the power of passing hope forward. Have you witnessed how one person's courage can inspire others to find their own strength? Because sometimes the greatest victories aren't measured in points scored or games won, but in the lives touched and the hope shared along the way. Before we reveal how this story comes full circle, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. 1 year after Kobe's visit to Cedar Grove Children's Hospital, a moment of kindness had grown into a movement that would leave an indelible mark on countless lives. On the anniversary of Kobe's visit, Cedar Grove hosted a special celebration. The recreation room, now known as the Hope Court, was filled with current and former patients, medical staff, and families whose lives had been touched by the program. Michael Wilson, though confined to a wheelchair, remained the heart of the community he had helped create. The morning began with a surprise. A video message from Kobe played on the large screen that had been installed for watching Lakers games. He spoke not as a basketball legend, but as someone who had been profoundly changed by his encounter with Michael and the movement it had inspired. True greatness, Kobe said in the message, isn't about the trophies we win or the records we break. It's about the lives we touch and the hope we share. Michael taught me that more than I ever taught him. The impact of those words resonated through the room. Dr. Robert Anderson, watching from the back, remembered the night 1 year ago when he had delivered the devastating news about Michael's worsening condition. Now, despite ongoing health challenges, Michael had achieved something far greater than anyone could have imagined. Jennifer Martinez, the nurse whose persistence had started it all, stood beside Michael as he addressed the gathering. Her simple act of refusing to give up on a child's wish had sparked a transformation in pediatric care that now reached far beyond Cedar Grove's walls. The Hoops of Hope program had expanded to 50 hospitals across the country. Anthony White, traveling between locations to help establish new programs, shared stories of how each hospital had adapted the concept to their unique needs while maintaining the core spirit of hope and community. Lisa Anderson, the teenage patient who had found purpose in keeping statistics, had recovered enough to return home. She now ran a blog documenting the program's impact, collecting stories from patients and families across the country. Her analytical skills, once focused solely on basketball stats, now helped track the program's growing influence. Rachel Brown, who had made her first wheelchair basket months ago, demonstrated how the program had evolved. Working with physical therapists, she had helped design new ways for patients with different abilities to participate. Her innovations had been adopted by hospitals nationwide. Dr. Christina Walker presented findings from her year-long study of the program's psychological impact. The data confirmed what everyone had witnessed. Patients involved in Hoops of Hope showed significantly better emotional resilience, treatment compliance, and overall quality of life during their hospital stays. But the most powerful moments came from the stories shared by families. William and Catherine Howard, whose son Daniel had received Michael's ring months ago, spoke about how the program had changed their perspective on their son's treatment. Daniel, now in remission, had started a youth basketball league for children recovering from serious illnesses. The championship rings, which had multiplied from 1 to 50, had taken on legendary status in the pediatric medical community. Each hospital had its own ring, passed from patient to patient, carrying with it stories of courage and determination. Dr. Elizabeth Martinez called them rings of hope, symbols not of athletic achievement, but of the unbreakable spirit of children fighting life's toughest battles. Michael's parents, James and Angela Wilson, had watched their son's wish transform from a simple desire to meet his hero into a movement that was changing lives. Their foundation now supported families at all 50 participating hospitals, providing both financial assistance and emotional support. Laura Miller, the physical therapist who had first noticed the program's therapeutic benefits, had developed a comprehensive rehabilitation protocol incorporating basketball-inspired exercises. Her methods were being studied and adopted by rehabilitation centers worldwide. The medical community had taken notice. the American Academy of Pediatrics had created a task force to study the integration of community-building programs like Hoops of Hope into standard treatment protocols. Dr. James Murphy's research had expanded to include 20 hospitals, documenting the measurable benefits of combining physical activity with emotional support. Michelle Patterson from the National Children's Hospital Association announced the creation of a national database for hospitals to share resources and experiences related to sports-based therapy programs. Cedar Grove's model had become a blueprint for transforming pediatric care. Local schools continued their involvement, but in new ways. Angela Morris's modified basketball curriculum had been adopted by the State Education Board as a model for inclusive physical education. Students learned not just about sports, but about empathy, resilience, and the importance of supporting others through their challenges. The impact extended beyond the medical and educational communities. Professional athletes from various sports began visiting participating hospitals, inspired by Kobe's example of genuine connection and ongoing commitment. Each visitor left changed by the experience, many becoming regular supporters of the program. Richard Johnson, who had helped make the original connection to Kobe, reflected on how a simple act of passing along a request had grown into something so profound. Sometimes the smallest decisions we make can change everything, he observed. We just have to be willing to take that first step. As the anniversary celebration continued, Michael shared his own reflection on the year's events. Though his health remained precarious, his spirit had never been stronger. When I wished to meet Kobe, he said, I thought it was about basketball. But it was really about learning that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves. The program's success had led to unexpected innovations. Hospitals began incorporating virtual reality technology to allow bedridden patients to participate in basketball activities. Gaming companies developed specialized controllers for patients with limited mobility. The focus remained on inclusion and community, ensuring that every child could be part of the team. Jennifer Martinez's role had evolved as well. She now headed a training program for medical staff, teaching them how to identify and nurture the emotional and spiritual needs of their patients. Her curriculum always began with the story of Michael's wish, but expanded into a comprehensive approach to holistic patient care. The media coverage had matured from heartwarming human interest stories to serious examination of how sports-based community programs could transform medical care. Emma Patterson's documentary about the program's first year was being used as a training tool in medical schools. Even the hospital's physical space had been transformed. The sterile corridors were now adorned with murals depicting basketball scenes interwoven with messages of hope and perseverance. Each participating hospital had developed its own unique visual identity while maintaining the core message that every patient was part of a larger team. As the celebration drew to a close, Michael made one final gesture that brought the story full circle. He presented Jennifer with a special championship ring, created specifically for the medical staff who had embraced and nurtured the program. You taught us that sometimes the biggest victories happen off the court, he said. This is for everyone who never stops believing in the power of a wish. The ring would join the others, not as a symbol of athletic achievement, but as a reminder that compassion, dedication, and belief in the human spirit could create miracles that no medical textbook could explain. So, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and share your thoughts about the power of believing in something bigger than ourselves. Have you witnessed how a single act of kindness can grow into a movement that changes lives? Because sometimes the greatest legacies aren't built on fame or fortune, but on the simple truth that hope, when shared, multiplies beyond measure.